I'll start recording. And so, yeah, for my class today, January 25th, to be marked on as present, you're on Discord. That's step one. Step two is to turn in that assignment on Inside Rankin, which is the chapter four homework. Yesterday, I was on a different computer, and we walked through a process of um, creating a model, which was a movie model, and then using this tool called Entity Framework to create a SQL Server database and not necessarily the database, but well, yes, it was a database and it was a table in the database. Um, and I figured it would be good practice to just kind of go through that a little bit quicker the second time through. So I know you guys were following along, and again, you can do it over if you wish, or you could just follow along, practice. Repetition helps. It's completely up to you. And so went ahead and selected C Sharp Web. I got to find the one that says the tongue twister ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. So we're going to select that. And I'm just going to put it in my folder. And so what we're going to do is get past where we were yesterday, but we're just going to um, we're going to redo it for practice. Data driven MVC web app. And we'll just call this movies app and demo one. It's called demo. And defaults. Okay, let me get situated on my end just a little bit more. If I got too many screens open up, I get real laggy. Okay, so once we get this template booted up, we really started by installing some dependencies. And so we'll run through that. And we did that with the NuGet package manager, the GUI one, not the console. And we clicked browse. Microsoft Entity Framework. SQL Server. Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Don't forget the word core, as I did. Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server. And I'm just now remembering this working without installing the three that we did yesterday, just installing the SQL Server package and then the tools package. So if I'm remembering right, when I did it for the first time, I just installed exactly those two. So I'll install the first one here, accept everything, and on the output we got finished. And then I'll go back to the tools. Entity Framework Core Tools, install. All right, then the next thing we did is we created this, we created a class called Movie Context. and this was in our models folder. And this class inherited DB context. So let's go ahead and do that. So there's finished. Let's close that now. So I just installed the 2, unlike the 3 yesterday. So now in my models, I'm going to start here by adding a class. And the name of the class is movie context. We need to bring in a using statement at the top of this. Entity framework core. That allows us to inherit from DB context. Remembering DB context is the class for communicating with the database. So we're creating this class that inherits from DB context. Then we built a constructor for this class that takes in a DB context options object. With context of options, this can kind of help us set options. We don't really do much with this besides pass that up to the base parent constructor. And then, you can put that on one line. It's just a constructor. Let's minimize the toolbox here. And let me zoom out just a tad to 150. You guys can see all that. And then we create what's called the DB set. So we'll create a table of movies. We don't have the data type yet, so this won't compile. The table will be called movies. Get set. Okay, so the next thing to go ahead and get this to work is to add our movie class inside of our model. So new class. This is a movie class. It is public. We're going to have data annotations to bring this in using system component model data annotations. It's going to allow us to add those attributes. Movie ID. String for the name. Default of string.empty.
Don't you need the error message equals? Please enter a name.
Yeah, I'm missing the error message equals. Good eye. And we're going to put in an int for the year. And it's nullable. Copy and paste required. Please enter a year. Range of still getting T89. And an integer for the rating. Int rating. enter a rating. One and five. 1, 5. Save that up. Now our movie context class isn't so upset now that we've got the class that we're creating a table out of. So then we come back into this movie context and we add a method uh, called onModelCreating, and this method is basically set to run um, um, and seed your movie data. So the next part is to seed movie data with the onModelCreating. And it is protected, which was a typo I had yesterday. Override void on model creating. Model builder called model builder. Let's see, that's actually pretty smart. So let's hit tab. Dot has data. Okay, this has data will take an array of movies, which we can instantiate right like such. Now, normally when you create a movie, you call the constructor, right? But keep in mind, um, there there's this other syntax where you use the properties. Um, it's called object initializers, and you don't need the parentheses. You just go straight to the curly braces, and then you could say, "Hey, the movie ID is 1." So this is another way of constructing an object using its auto-implemented properties. Name is Casablanca. Okay, and let's copy that. Let's put a comma. Copy that. Paste it a couple times. Remove that last comma. Change the data. Uh, I think my laptop's on its last leg. This fan's kind of buzzing. I've had it for a good number of years now. Being worked pretty hard. Okay, so there's the end of my method. There's the end of my overridden on model creating. The next couple of things that we did was we added a connection string and we enabled something called dependency injection. So if we recall, the connection string was in app settings. So I'm going to open up my app settings, and you're always at risk of typos with connection strings. I'm no different, so let's try and avoid that. But connection strings equals curlies, quotes, movie context. This is obviously the name of the class that we just created. Now I gotta get my Server Explorer up and running, so let's go Object Explorer, SQL Server Object Explorer. Let's expand SQL Server. There's my local DB. Okay, it is in fact the same thing as it was on my other machine. So again, if you can copy and paste, you can right click rename, just copy that, do server, equals database equals movies semi trusted underscore connection true. Okay, all that's on one line. Close the curly, close the curly. Okay, so there's our connection string. And the next thing was in our program.cs to enable this thing called dependency injection, which we said yesterday will inject a movie context into the controllers that need them. And so I kind of mentioned like, hey, I didn't really understand that until I actually saw it, and then it made more sense. So it's something that's kind of coming in a little bit on its way. So let's add Entity Framework Core dependency injection. We're getting some injections today. Builder services. Add DB context. A movie context. Again, that's the class that we created. With options, arrow, options, use SQL Server, use SQL Server, parentheses, builder, configuration, get connection string, movie context, triple parentheses, semicolon. So that's one heck of a line. Next up was we created what was called a migration. And we did that at the council. So I'm going to close, close, close. If you ever just want to make sure that your project's in a good space, you could always do a build solution. Make sure nothing funny's going on. One succeeded. It's not exactly running fast right now, but it succeeded. So let's bring up that console. So we're going to go Tools, Package Manager, Console. We're going to create a migration. And so, this migration is like basically going to create a script for us to create the database. It's like the SQL that will run to then create the tables and insert the data. All right, so it created a migrations folder with like a snapshot that we could roll back to. Should we like screw something up, we could roll back to a snapshot out of our database at a point in time. We don't really have anything in here. But it's just an interesting file to see. We're creating a table called movies. It's got a movie ID. That movie ID is the primary key, and we got some data going in. So we got insert data command. So that's nice. And then the last thing that we did yesterday that we're repeating is updating the database. And we get this value of done. So now this movies database exists. It did not exist before. And when we do it a second time, Goes a little bit faster the second time, and it's not really the code along that we were doing yesterday, so go a little faster. So that's where we left off yesterday. So now we get to continue. If you're following along with the textbook at home, you're looking roughly at page 148. And page 148 is where we're going to start to talk about link. And so you're going to start seeing some link queries to working with data, in particular, selecting data. Um, and so they kind of bring in some link queries that will ultimately we will write these link queries and modify them. And it's been a while since we've used the link, but it'll come back to you. Um, so there's a where clause. Of course, the where clause is going to filter your data. An order by is going to sort it. A first or default is going to return a single object. And then there's a to list, which obviously is going to be multiple entities. So when you see first or default, you're just returning one thing. When you're seeing a to list, well, then you're seeing multiple things. There's also a find method where you could pass a primary key, like find a movie with the ID of 1. So the find method is looking at the primary key values for the ID of a movie in this case. And so those are just some link methods that we will be using. Of course, it's a full, CRUD app, and so um, we'll be doing not only selecting data, but inserting and updating, so on and so forth. Looking at page 150, it says how to view the generated SQL statements. And it says an app settings JSON file that generated SQL statements. Um,
Hey, real quick, whenever you open up your DBO.movies, do you see the actual movies in there or just the structure of the
right click and view data. Amel, did you is that are you saying you got that table created?
I'm on my downstairs computer, and then as far as the MacBook, I think I've reached the end of the road with that, so I'm gonna be using a different laptop in class.
Okay,
Yeah,
a Mac.
it's definitely a Mac issue. Yeah, because I'm running Windows 11 ARM, and my SQL Server is not supported on that.
Got it.
But I'm good to go now.
Okay, oh, that's great to hear. Um, so there's a little code snippet here that I will, just as out of the book, I'll paste this as an example of some link that we'll work with, and this little code chunk is a pretty straightforward um, code chunk to add a new movie, right? And so there's a method called save changes that okay, so we create a movie. That's what the first line does. We we call this add method that exists on the movies table of our movies context. So we have to create this context variable that's a movies context. which comes from this class right here. So we'll end up working with an instance of this class. We're going to call it context. That's what you're looking at here. Context dot movies table. Add a movie. And then you have to call this save changes method, which obviously applies that new addition. So we'll be doing this, and so that's just an example of some of the code to come ahead. And so now we get to actually, now that we're kind of done building that table, we're going to build some controllers and views to to display that in a web page instead of just displaying it in Visual Studio. So let's start with our home controller. So we have a home controller. And I'm going to delete this iLogger. I'm going to delete this constructor. I'm going to delete this privacy. It says 0 references. I'm going to delete that. I'm not deleting this index method because I'm going to obviously use that here in a little bit. I'm going to delete this error. There's 0 references to that. I'm going to basically kind of empty out my home controller. And now we're going to create that variable of type movie context that I was just referencing called context. Get set. And public home controller. So here's a constructor, movie context CTX. This is the shorthand for saying that this constructor just returns context equals CTX. Okay. This is this dependency injection that I said would make sense in a little bit. This dependency injection said it will pass the movie context instance, right, which is the tie into our database, into our controller. So obviously this is a constructor for the controller that receives that context. Then we initialize this context field equal to that value that's passed in. And so this dependency injection line that we wrote, it's being used here when this app is running. And so without that, this would not work. Let's go ahead and build out our index. Again, this is kind of like this method here on the home controller. This method runs by default, right? This is the page load. This is the home page. And so we need to code out basically a little bit of link here to to query our context, right? So here's a little bit of link var movies, right? So we're gonna create, if you kind of go back into our C# class, maybe it would help to remind you guys, you know, the whole time we're using strings and doubles and floats and chars and bool. We're using a strictly typed language. And then towards the end of the class, when we said, hey, if we don't know exactly the data type, we do have the flexibility to use this dynamically typed thing called var. And so this is going to wind up being similar to a list of type movie. Okay, so essentially we know that this is going to return a list of movies, So when I say var here, that's what that's going to wind up being. But it's just easier to say var than list of movies. Um, and so this is our query. This is what we're going to use context. Remember, context dot movies, and we could just do an order by the movie um, arrow m dot name. So this is a little bit of that link syntax. But this is basically alphabetical order. We're ordering our movies by name. Our movies are being put into a list. We're storing that in a list of movies. And then we're returning this movies list to our view. So, not terribly complicated. This controller opens a connection to our database. When this controller is constructed, we don't have to call this constructor, it's just called for us. Opens a connection to our database, queries the database, returns the list of movies to the view.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you explain? You did an arrow function, but you called it M. Like, how does that work? How did you go from movies to just like M?
Yeah, I mean, this could be movie,
Hmm.
movie.name.
So that can be anything, but it's still gonna know that it's gonna take the movies and
Yeah,
sort it by name.
it's gonna take each movie. It's kind of like
Hmm.
a for each loop.
Gotcha.
We're gonna loop over the movies where each movie we're ordering by the movie.name.
Okay.
So
I have a
M here just is a very short syntax for an individual movie.
I have a question, kind of building on that one.
Yeah.
So like, not maybe not this arrow function here, but the one on line 11.
Yep.
Like, what is that exactly that doing?
Yep. This is a I would need to probably to fully explain it, um, kind of back out of this demonstration and go
If
into
you want to wait, like we can talk about it later. But I
we,
wanted to kind of bring that up as something I'm not really like super clear on. So
yeah. So right, normally this wouldn't look like this. Normally this would just look like this, right?
yeah,
That's how that would look, and this would work. So when I
that's like
see that,
the same thing.
it's the same thing. So when I see
Okay.
that arrow function there, I think, okay, all that's really doing is getting rid of the curlies, and it allows it on a single statement. Since there's now multiple statements here, we don't need the curlies, and we could just replace it with an arrow.
Okay. And then that's the context of that arrow. But then the arrow on line 15, that's more of like a SQL link statement,
This is a link
right?
statement, correct?
Okay. Okay. That's all I was curious about.
Yeah. So yeah, so to answer your question, that's exactly right. This is more of a link statement arrow, and this is more of a shorthand for any method, really, that just does one thing. You can not have the curlies and replace it with that arrow. All right. So now I need to go to the home index view. I'm going to kind of start by clearing all this out. Um, as we've done before, we're going to say that our model, well, we're bringing in a list of movie. So this is a what's called a strongly typed view. And we'll give this page a title called My Movies. And let's kind of um, sure, we'll just delete all this. is um, the first part here. We're just building for later, and that's going to say, hey, we're going to have a movie controller, which we don't have right now, and it's going to have a method called add, and this will be a link to add a new movie. Again, that obviously isn't going to work right away, just kind of setting that up for later. And here's a bootstrap table with the border and kind of alternating colors. So there's our table. Tables are broken up into T head and T body. Inside of the head, we're going to have a row with table headings. So 1, 2, 3, 4 table headings. The first one will say name. Okay, so there's really only there's 3 properties, and then we're going to save a 4th column, if you will, for some buttons down in our body. So the movie names, the years, the rating, and then this 4th column will be for our buttons that we're going to use. Here's a little bit of Razor syntax. We get a for each loop, for each movie in the model. So that's an interesting syntax, right? We define the model up here as a list of movies that comes in from the controller. So for each movie in the model, this is really kind of neat stuff where we can just say, okay, let's create a row for each movie. Let's create a row and put out that movie.name, year, and rating. Okay, I did mention a 4th column that's going to have some buttons in it. In this case, just a link, and we can format it as a button if we want. But here, our controller, again, is a movie controller that we don't have yet, with an action in that controller that doesn't exist called edit. So none of this exists. ASP route ID. We can use the movie ID. So to that edit, okay, again, we're going to build this so it'll make sense, but in this edit method, we're going to pass a little bit of extra information, which is that movie ID, because obviously we need to know which movie we're going to edit. So it's going to say movie ID of 1 or movie ID of 2, right? So then this anchor tag will say edit. Let me minimize this to kind of give more real estate so you can see all that. So there'll be a link that says edit, a button if you want. We'll have another one to delete. And so it's the movie controller, the delete action, and the link that says delete. Close the table data, close the table row, close the curly. Now there's, 3 movies? So this for each loop will make 3 rows. And for each row, spit all that out. And save and run, and we'll find our bugs. Okay, so this is normal. You get this the first time again. Would you like to trust core SSL? Yes, I do. Do you want to install the certificate? Yes, I do. Don't ask me again. Yes, I trust the certificate. Yes. You get those little warnings the first time. And it's loading on my other monitor. Drag it over. Voila. We are now performing a select star out of our movies database. We are 1/4 of the way done with CRUD.
I might need a little help with mine.
Yeah, no problem. It's a good time for a pause anywho. So let's pause. Okay, so the recording is back online, and as we alluded to here, there is a controller called Movie that we have not created yet to add new movies, to edit movies, or delete a movie. And so one thing that you'll see as we build out this movie controller, and I mentioned it yesterday, that adding a new movie is basically all the same controls of editing a movie. And so for that reason, we wind up using the same view because again, it's the same controls. And with a few tweaks, you can do that. You can reuse the same view for different behaviors there. So we'll get into that. But again, what we're doing next is creating this movie controller. So right click controller, add a controller, an empty controller. And we'll call this movie controller. Should append the .cs for us. Movie controller inherits from controller. And because we're going to be doing these operations on the table, we need to bring in that context again, the movie context. So private. This is the same thing we did on the home controller. As well as the constructor that's more or less used to initialize this variable called context. So here's our controller, movie context, and the convention CTX, arrow, context equals CTX. This is exactly what we did already. Oops, movie controller. So when there is a get request for an add method. So we're going to start coding out these different methods that will send us to different views. And so one thing that we coded over here in my view, in our view, is we said, hey, on the movie controller, there is an add method that we're going to use to add a new movie. And so this link right here will generate a get request, right? So you're saying, give me a new page. So this will be a get request. So we'll kind of start by coding this HTTP get request. So this is an action method called add. It's called an action method because it returns a view view bag dot action just a little string here that we can use saying that, hey, we're adding a new movie. And we're going to go return to a view, the edit view. So again, keep in mind the add and the edit will use the same view. So we're going to say, hey, go to the edit view, but then pass it a new movie. Right, so this new movie will essentially be using all the defaults, like empty string for the title, no value for the rating or anything like that. So when they click that link that navigates to this method, it will essentially return the edit view with an empty movie. And that's what we're going to do for the add. Now, next for the edit, if we kind of go down here, we need a method for the edit. Again, the controller is movie. We need an edit method. And remember I said that we're passing a route ID. And so this route ID is going to come into this method as a parameter variable. So you'll see how this is coded. Again, this is a get. Public I action result called edit int ID. Okay, so here's the ID, that's your parameter. Again, that's going to come in from the view. That data will come in. Just a little string that says, hey, this is an edit. Because we're editing, we need to write a little link query using this context. So let's say, hey, we're going to have a movie context dot movies. So in our movies table, find, remember find is the one that uses the primary key. So we're passing in the primary ID value. We're doing a find method here. Pretty straightforward. Storing it in a variable, and then we send that to the view. Return.
I have a quick question. Can we use ctx.movies, or does it have to be context?
No, it has to be context because that's in the scope. CTX is out of scope here. CTX
Okay.
is only in scope inside this constructor.
Okay.
We're just using CTX to assign the context a value. And then from there on out, you use context. Okay, so we've got now some methods that are wired up to send us to a view. And because this is the edit view, it's automatically going to go to the edit folder view. Again, we don't have that edit folder view yet. But again, both of these use the same view. Now, it's different when you are doing a post of an edit. If you think about a post of an edit, HTTP post, well, now the end user has made some changes to a movie. And you're looking to save those changes. So let's go ahead and code there's going to be a new movie kind of coming in that's been modified. So you could call this modified movie, right? So you would recognize that this is in fact a modified movie. It's not like a new movie or anything like that. So we're going to check model state is valid. Just like you guys did on the hands-on test, you want to make sure that you don't have any validation errors. And then from there, there's an if statement. If modified movie dot movie ID is 0, meaning there is no movie ID, we are posting a new movie at that point, right? So keeping in mind that add and edit, well, add, this is the get for add, but this is the behavior for the posting of the ad, right? So even though it's called edit, because we're using the same view, when we post a new movie, this is essentially this case. If the modified movie is 0, if the movie ID is 0, the end user didn't give them a movie ID. We are adding a new movie. So this is the case for adding a new movie. So the way that we're going to do that, context movies.add, and we could call it modified movie. So that's, again, the movie that's being sent into this method. You could call it modified movie, you could just call it movie, whatever you like. But okay. Otherwise, here's our else statement. This is an update. If you remember last semester, we got, we heard the term upsert. If you heard, upsert, uh, upsert is sometimes it does an update, other times it does an insert. So that's kind of what's happening here. In some cases we're doing an insert, in other cases we're doing that update. And regardless if we're adding or if we're updating, we will do a context dot save changes. And then if we make it this far, we're still inside the outer if, right? We're still inside this outer if the model state is valid and our validation passes. Then we do a little redirect to action, redirect the index action of the home controller. Okay, so either we do an add new movie or we update a movie and we redirect you to the home page so that you can see the results of that. Else, we know the data in this case, invalid data. And here, if basically validation didn't pass, well, you have to kind of figure out if validation didn't pass. Now, here we got, this is very clear. The action is edit, the action is add. But on this case, on this post, you really don't know, again, if it's a edit or an add. So what do you tell the action to be? And so you can kind of run a little ternary operator, and it looks if the movie ID is 0, then you're going to say add, otherwise it's an edit. Right, so here you've got a MOV typo, movie ID. This is just an if else statement. If the movie ID is 0, then the action is add. Otherwise, the action is an edit. And we just return to the view the movie that was passed in that was invalid. And we kind of basically let the validation errors pop up. That, either a field was left blank or it was out of range or whatever it may be. So this is mainly complex because, again, you're just trying to use this one view for multiple functions. But if I start to consolidate this down, there's your add, there's your edit, and there's your post for your edit. Okay, we're not really using this index view. I'm going to delete that. And all that's really left, kind of going back to here, we've got add squared away as far as our controller is concerned. We haven't created any views. We've got the edit action squared away. Now we've got to square away the delete. So the delete has a get and a post as well. So let's go back to our movie controller. Let's do our get. And just like the other ones, you're going to send in an ID into the parameter of the movie. So here's the parameter that gets sent in from the view. And we're going to do a little link here, var movie, context, movies.find by the ID. Now this is just on the get, we're not actually deleting anything here. We're just going to display the movie that we're going to delete. Return to the view the movie that you found. So again, this is kind of like saying the user clicked delete on a movie. It's going to send them to a page where it kind of shows the movie info. So we just got to query for that. We got to find that movie, send that movie to the view, so the view can display that movie info. That then we're going to click delete, and when we actually click delete, this is the link query that does the delete. This is our posts. We're going to receive a movie. This is the movie we're going to delete. And we can run a remove method. Context, again, anytime we're hitting our database, we're hitting this context object. And we're running a little against the movies table, remove. Save the changes, always got to save the changes. And then we redirect. Redirect to action. Index and home. Okay, and that's our movies controller. I know there was a lot of code in there and we went through it relatively fast. Page 155 is where we got the code from. I did my best to explain it as I walked through it. Of course, if you need to, and my explanation didn't work, you could always hit the book or ask again. That's totally fine. And just like today, I kind of redid some of the code from yesterday. I'm going to do that again tomorrow. So you guys will get repetition on this.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Is the movie that the HTTP post is taking in for the delete, is that being pulled in from the get? Like, are the delete get and the delete post like somehow passing data between each other?
So what's going to happen here is on your home controller,
Mm-hmm.
you got to understand the first piece, which is, we have this home controller that right now, if we fire this up, it's got a list of movies on it, right? And then for
Mhm.
each movie, there's a delete button. And so this, Casablanca has an ID of 1, right? A delete. What we're going to be able to do, take a look at that path. We're going to be able to say, okay, delete the movie of 1. So this movie ID on the delete function is coming into the get for the delete method as this ID. So it's coming from the home page, and that ID is being sent in right here.
So that ID is one
That
technically,
ID
if you
is
like.
going to be 1, correct?
Okay.
So this ID comes in as 1. We then
Hmm.
run a link query to basically, hit the database again. And then we're going to go to a view that's called, it's called index inside of a delete folder. We haven't created this view yet. And we're going to send that movie to it.
So that index is going to have the ID of the movie we're trying to delete, which we can then run the post on.
Right. And then
Okay.
we're going to call this post delete,
Hmm.
which will then send in the movie essentially that we sent. So it kind of goes from here to the view, and then from the view back into here.
Gotcha.
So I think that's kind of what you were getting at, is that it's kind of going from place to place, and the answer to that is yeah, it is. It's going from the ID is coming from the home view into this delete inside of this controller, and from there it's going to another view, until they click, the delete button on that view, which then sends that movie back in to actually run the command to delete.
If you actually go to our website and you click delete, you can see at the link that it's linking to that ID. So like if you click delete on Casablanca, it'll be like delete/1.
Exactly. And why is that? That's because this route ID is handling
Hmm.
it for us. This helper tag.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You still have the iAction result index on your movie controller?
I kind of swiftly deleted that. I did that kind of like in the back end,
Okay.
but yeah, I did I deleted the index. Okay, so the next thing is to go ahead and create the one view that is used for both the new movie and the edit movie. Um, so give me just 1 second. Obviously, this is going to go inside of our views.
Can you hear me, Mr. G?
Yes.
Okay, so right there on the edit movie, that's not the same as the movie that's inside the delete, right? That's just the naming you're choosing right there. Like to be more, I guess, specific, like in the delete, would you maybe call it like movie to delete or something
Movie
like
to
that?
delete. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I started that. I started calling this edited movie and deleted movie, but I backed out on that. All right. So now that we have a movie controller, um, we need a subfolder inside of our views called movie. So again, the convention is home controller, home folder, movie controller. Let's go ahead and create a new folder here in our views. Add a folder, and it's a singular movie folder, to which point we will create an edit view. Add a view. It's an empty view called edit. Man, my laptop is buzzing. Okay. So, we will have a model, which is a movie. And the title will be dynamic viewBag.action, which we already kind of set that, plus the word movie after a space. We'll say view data subtitle, capital T, is our title that we just coded. H2 view bag dot title. And again, this is used for two purposes, but it calls on the same action. So the action, ASP action, is going to be the movie controller, and we're going to post it to the edit action. So this is the same action that we coded that handled both an adding a new movie and an updating a movie. So when they post here on this form, we're going to call the edit action that we just got done coding. We say method is post, so that should make sense. Little validation summary. Little divs for some formatting here. Label control. ASP4 name. And a text box for the name. So if you're doing an edit, obviously these fields will auto-populate with the movie that you're editing. If you're doing a new one, then they'll be empty. Form control. We essentially have 3 of these. So you can copy and paste, and then each time you have a couple of things to change. So copy paste. This one is for year. You change it twice on the label and once on the text box. And then we've got the final one, which is for rating. And once on the text box. Now, if you have a field that you don't want to display to the user, such as the movie ID, that's a very, you guys might remember the hidden input control, input type of hidden. We learned about it in HTML, but we just never really used it much because we never had much data to hide. But it does make sense that we don't want to show the ID. So you could load that into the form. And so you can have that data if you need it. you have access to it. Then we need to have a submit button, right? So that's a hidden field with the ID. So let's go ahead and button type of submit, class of button, button primary, and save. And then we can also give them a cancel button that'll take them to the home controller, index method, class of button, button secondary. You know, you might wonder why is one a link and one's a button, but they're both formatted like buttons. They look the same, but one has a behavior, which is to do a post to this action here on the form, and the other one is just going to navigate you somewhere else. All right, and I think we're at a point where we can click play. We actually have coded quite a bit. Now the delete's not going to be working, but I'm thinking the add and the edit are are at a potential working point. At the same time, there's always something that breaks. So let's click play. I don't like seeing that. Either I'm not patient enough. Let me stop. And I'm going to build my solution. And now I'm going to run without debugging. Looks like Vinny added a new movie.
Yeah, it's working on my end flawlessly.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I think a good old-fashioned reboot does quite a bit, so I'm going to save it, close it down, and reboot. I mean, if you literally just coded along with what I did and it's working on your end, I think don't think it's the code that I wrote. I think it's Visual Studio kind of getting hung up and me not being patient enough. Like my mouse is even lagging.
You could try to stop sharing on Discord because I know like Discord takes up a lot of resources, so it might be just too much for your computer to do Visual Studio and Discord.
Yeah, actually, sometimes just minimizing Discord, it seems to be running better. Sometimes just minimizing Discord. Now it's booting. Yeah, I've done that before where Discord just is a resource hog, like you're saying. Okay, add a new movie. Okay, so notice the URL. We now go to the movie controller and the add method. Um, it says add movie. Well, where is that coming from? Um, if we were to go to the movie controller, add, let's just put in a couple, like a typo there, AADD.
Try launching it in a different browser, maybe.
Not a bad idea. Um, I just had it up, and for whatever reason, I said, you know what? Let's change something. For no good reason. It was working. I should have just demoed it. Launch. Web server listening. I wonder if I manually type localhost 7254. Okay. And there you go, AADD movie. I just manually opened it up since it seemed like it was running, and there it is. Um, so for whatever reason, this is a movie called Easy Run. This is the year 2023, and it's a 12-star rating. I should get a validation error because again, we coded that attribute there and put in the summary. So let's click save. And we got the movie Easy Run. Now if I click on edit, and now we change that to a hard run. Uh, we are up and running with reading data, editing data, and adding new data.
Can you go back to like the save and cancel buttons?
The save and the cancel buttons
Yeah,
um, here.
or no, the ones on the like the edit.
There you go. So the next action item is to make the view for delete. So again, inside of our movie controller, we have these delete methods, which go to a delete view that we have to create. So obviously these go to the edit view. The add goes to the edit view because we say this is kind of like a overriding, right? The convention is to go to a view with the same name as this controller. So um, all that just to say, inside of movie, we need a new view called delete. model movie. This one's a lot easier because it just has a single purpose, which is to delete a movie. And of course, they've already clicked the delete button once, so when we give them an H2, we're asking them to confirm deletion of a movie. And we sent in a movie, so we could say model dot name, model year, and form action. It's a delete, it's a method of post. Again, we'll kind of hide the movie ID. There it goes. Just wasn't keeping up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused on why it's called model dot name and like model dot year. Why is it not like movie dot name?
We define our model as a movie. It would be certainly more readable if you were to say the movie's name, but that's essentially what it is. I mean, you understand that it is one particular movie's name and one particular movie's year. But Ryan, I had the same exact thought. Um, um, it would be more readable code if it did say the movie's name and the movie's year. So literally all we're doing is putting the movie name and the year in an H3, and we're saying, are you sure you want to do this? And then we give them a submit button, a delete button, in other words, and a cancel button. And close the form. Now, upon booting this up, I should in fact should still have my running movie that I can now delete. So I still have my running movie because it was ultimately saved in a database. I'm going to click on delete. It now sends me to this URL, movie delete 4. Says confirm deletion of hard run 2023, delete or cancel. When I click on delete, it's going to go to the movie controller delete method that's a post and redirect me to the home page. And now she's gone. Gentlemen, that's as far as I wanted to get today. I also wanted to give you guys time to do the homework that I have to collect for an attendance assignment. Okay, so this is a good stopping point. We can do CRUD operations on a single thing. If you're looking forward in the chapter, there's more topics to hit, and we will continue this lecture tomorrow. And that deals with multiple tables, obviously. Relational databases, multiple tables. That's where we're going. So you've got a homework assignment. It's not a ton of questions, but there are some. And that's what we can work on now.
Real quick, should we delete